My name. Good evening and welcome. My name is Alice Knapp. I'm president of the Ferguson Library, and it is my pleasure to be here tonight for the Friends of the Ferguson Library's special author series, a repeat because the first time was so much fun, of author Alka Joshi. I wanted to say that the Friends are really that fantastic, wonderful organization behind the Ferguson Library. Not only do they arrange to bring wonderful authors to us, but they also run our bookstore. They run fantastic fun events like our literary pub crawl, which will be coming back this fall. And they underwrite so many of the library's programs. So if you would like to find out more about the Friends, just look in the chat. There is a link. And think about donating or becoming a member. Tonight, we are just so lucky. Alka Joshi was born in India and raised in the United States since the age of 9. She has a BA from Stanford University and an MF from California College of Arts. Joshi released her debut novel, The Henna Artist, which immediately became a New York Times bestseller. A Reese Witherspoon book club pick, was longlisted for the Center for Fiction First Novel Prize, and is being developed for a TV series. The sequel, and I'll promise we won't give away too many secrets, The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, is her second novel, and I actually got an advanced reading copy, and I'm here to tell you, you're gonna love it. It's one of those you cannot put down. But with that, let me introduce Alka Joshi. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you so much, Alice, and thank you, Ferguson Library, and thank you to libraries in general for all of us authors who didn't know how to talk to people, so we read books all the time. We kept ourselves busy writing books. I really had no intention of ever becoming an author. I really wanted to be an artist. I wanted to draw and paint and maybe illustrate storybooks. But I guess that just wasn't in my future. I ended up going into advertising. I really enjoyed it. And I ended up starting my own marketing and advertising agency, which I ran for 25 years or so. And, I was writing mini stories all the time, tiny little stories that had to be communicated within a 1 minute or a 30-second time frame, sometimes radio spots that were only 15 seconds long. So, it had to be fast, and it had to be a good story in order to catch people's attention. And my husband would keep saying, I think you could do this in a novel. You could do the same thing you do with those commercials. You could do that in a novel, because I know you're constantly inventing stories about people. And, sometimes they're like outrageous stories. And I think, where did she get that? But I decided to finally follow his advice at age 51 and entered a Master's of Fine Arts, an MFA program in creative writing. And that taught me a lot of what I needed to know as far as how to compose a novel, how to make sure that you can sustain interest of a reader after 300, 400 pages, and also how to develop character. But 2 years is not enough to really understand how to write a novel. So I had to keep going for another 8 years, taking time off to work, taking time off because I was grieving because my mother died, and I had written The Henna Artist in particular for her. And then I took time off just because I was exhausted and, I wanted to do something else. So finally, The Henna Artist is produced, and I had so many wonderful people help me along the way. No one writes a book by themselves. I really want you to know that, because if you're out there trying to figure out how an author writes a book or how you might write a book someday, I just want you to know it takes as long as it takes, and it takes a lot of people to help you along the way. Nobody writes the book by themselves. So in my case, I had had a wonderful literary agent who used to drive me crazy because she would not send the manuscript off to a publisher. And I kept saying, when are we sending this off? When are we sending this off? Why do we have to keep making all these changes? And she said, because as a debut author, you have to make that book sing or you won't get a second and a third book contract. So I followed her advice. Another set of people who really helped me along the way are what's called developmental editors. If you are writing a book or want to write a memoir someday, these people come in really handy. You hire them, they look over your finished manuscript, and they will give you all kinds of wonderful suggestions on how to make it even better. And then, of course, there was my editor at the publishing house. Once we got the contract, there was my mentor, Anita Amirazwani, whose book, The Blood of Flowers, I encourage you all to read also. And, you know, I just had so many people help me along the way, and it's been an incredible journey. So as soon as we put the henna artists to bed at the printers, Malik, one of the young people in one of the characters in the henna artist, who is actually Lakshmi's helper. He doesn't know whether he's 8 years old or 9 years old because he's never had a birth certificate. And by the way, I borrowed that little piece from my father's journey. My father never had known exactly how old he was because he never had a birth certificate either. He was born in a village, one of 13 children. So that was what was happening in the henna artist. Now, Malik started bugging me as soon as I put the henna artist to bed. He said, you know what? I've got a story to tell. You got to tell my story. I had actually started another project, and the voices are so insistent that I had to put that project aside and start listening to him. Now, the thing about characters, when you've been living with them for 10 years, is they are like a part of your family. They are constantly in your imagination. They are in your sleep, your dreams. I'm taking a shower and sometimes they'll just start doing something in my head. And I have to pay attention to that, because what they're basically doing is telling me where they want to go, what they want to do, what they want to say. So I listen. And I started listening to Malik. And here is how The Secret Keeper of Jaipur started, with a scene. So I will describe the scene to you, because this is my writing process. I start with a scene first. It's very visual. I am a visual writer because of my artistic background. And so I see scenes so clearly in my head. And sometimes it feels as if I am a movie director, because I will have characters moving along in the scene the way they want to move. And then I'll say, I don't know, I want the dialogue to be different. So everybody goes back to their original places, and then they try a new set of dialogue or a new action in that scene. So that's how it starts for me. Now, for The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, it started with this particular scene. We are at the Shimla Mall. Shimla is a beautiful city at the foothills of the Himalayas. That is where my family used to vacation when Rajasthan got too hot. And Rajasthani summers are sort of like how Portland is right now. It is that hot. And so in order to escape, a lot of families will go up into the mountains, Mount Abu, or up in the Shimla area, or even further northeast in the Himalayas. So we used to go to Shimla, which is why I know this town really well. In the Shimla Mall, there is this large pedestrian mall where honeymooners and vacationing couples all, walk. And along the mall are all of these historical references, like the Christ Church, like the Regency Hotel, like, there's a Mahatma Gandhi statue at one end. And so as tourists are going through each of these items of interest, they are being serenaded by all the vendors along the mall. So what I see is a young woman setting up her wares along this mall. Her name is Nimmi. And I know that she's a tribal woman because of the way that she's dressed. She's not dressed like everybody else who lives in Shimla. And I thought, oh, that's interesting that a tribal woman is sitting there. She is setting up wares that are actually flora that she has collected. They're very difficult to find in Shimla, but if you go up into the higher mountain reaches, you can find these very exotic flora. And that's what she has spread out in front of her. At her feet is a woven basket where she has two small children. And these small children are hers, I realize, and they are tethered to the basket so they will not wander off while she's busy with customers. The next thing I see is that there are two people walking towards Nimmi. One of them is Malik and one of them is Lakshmi. And I realize, oh, Malik is no longer a boy. He is 20 years old now. So he's 20, and I observe what he's wearing in his clothing. I observe how he walks. He has a very relaxed gait, just like how Malik always had. And Lakshmi standing next to him, if he is 20, must be 40 something. So that is what she is. Now, I notice that she's dressed in a wool sari, and so that means it's still a little chilly, and it's probably either spring or fall. And I also see that when they come closer to her stall and they start looking at her products, I notice that Malik is taking more time watching Nimmi, and that Lakshmi is actually looking at what she wants to buy. And then I realize Malik and Nimmi are attracted to one another. There's some chemistry there. I don't know at this point whether they have met each other before, whether they have talked to one another, whether they've ever spent a night together. I don't know that yet. All I know is I feel that attraction. And then when I look over at Lakshmi in this scene, I realize Lakshmi's not happy with this interaction, and she would prefer that he was not getting involved with this tribal woman, or has no plans to do so. And so now, as an author, I have to ask myself these questions. What in the world is Malik still doing in Shimla after he's graduated from the fancy school that Samir Singh from the first novel sent him to? What is he doing? Why is he in Shimla? Does he have a job? Does he have some way of earning an income? And also, I notice he's way better dressed than he used to be. He used to be a scruffy boy in the henna artist because he was a street child, and he would borrow slippers, rubber slippers from anybody and everybody. And sometimes they were 2 sizes too big. It didn't matter to him because he was more interested in learning as much as he could from Lakshmi and her way of doing business. Now, as I'm asking this question, I'm also wondering, why is this tribal woman still in Shimla? There are nomadic tribes that move up and down the Himalayas from the north to the south in the southern foothills because they are tending to their sheep and their goat and their water buffalo. And these herds all need to eat, so they constantly need to be moving. So as the weather gets warmer, the herds move back up north. As the weather gets cooler, they move back down into the foothills. So I know that she's one of these women, but why is she seems to be permanently established in Shimla, and why is that? And then I have to ask myself, why is Lakshmi not happy about Malik being involved with this woman if that is what's about to happen? So as I answer these questions, more scenes come to me. And then I start wondering about more questions based on those scenes, and more scenes and more scenes. And then finally, I will start writing some of this stuff down. As soon as I have revised everything in my head as if I were editing a movie, then finally I feel like, okay, that scene is pretty well developed. Now I can write it down. Once I have written down all of those scenes, it's like I've threaded this necklace. Then I'm going to go through and add in any transition scenes, and I will draft and redraft and redraft and redraft that novel until it feels right. So that's kind of how, my process of writing goes. And then here's the other thing. I had all of this information that I had written in the henna artist, all of this backstory on Malik. Why does he live in the Pink City? Who takes care of him? When he leaves Jaipur, I knew that he had to leave Jaipur, that he didn't even have a choice. But I had put that in the henna artist and it got taken out. Because, that story was really focused on what was happening with Lakshmi. And so my editors all said, Malik stuff doesn't need to be in there as much. I also had backstory of Radha in there that did not make it into the first book. And I had also future stories of both of them, because I had written so many different epilogues in the henna artist 10 years later, right? 10 years later, and here's 10 pages of what you can expect these characters to be doing. Because just as I told you that these characters live in my head as my family, I am really curious to know what's happening with them. You know, as they get older, what is happening? What are they doing? So I had written his future story and I had written Radha's future story in The Henna Artist, but it did not make it into the final cut. So now I have a story about Radha that needs to be told as an adult. So that is book number 3 of the Jaipur trilogy, as we're calling it. And book number 3 is going to be out in 2023, about the same time that the film series for The Henna Artist will start filming. Okay, so that should give you sort of an overview of what's happening. And then Alice, let's get started on any questions that you might have.
One of the things, and just listening to you talk, because I think it's fascinating that you're starting with this scene. And I've heard writers talk about the craft of writing is writing every single day. But that isn't your take?
No. And in my MFA program, that was something that the professors kept drilling into us, that if you write every day, it becomes a practice. It becomes something that, like, if you run every day, you cannot feel good unless you're running, you know? Yeah. For me, it was never like that. I think it's because I have had a business, first of all. So I know what it is to have a client say, you've got to finish this commercial by this date. You've got to finish this marketing brochure by this date. I work on deadlines. And I know what it is to constantly be thinking creatively and letting things mull over in my brain before I ever set them down on paper. So that's sort of been my process all along in my work. And I just continued it when I started writing fiction. And it's very counterintuitive to what everybody always says. You know, you've got to do this every single day. You've got to do it for certain hours, number of hours per day. You've got to do it from 6 to 8 in the morning, you know, establish your time. And I guess maybe if I weren't so disciplined in my own work and in my own sort of day-to-day, diary, if I weren't disciplined enough, I might need to write every single day, but I don't.
Wow. We're already getting questions in chat and Q&A, so I'm going to ask people to put your questions in chat, but this one's actually a good one. When you began the book, you're starting with a prologue, and it's a very, very dramatic scene, and with all sorts of implications for the rest of the book. But the most important one is the collapse of the Royal Jewel Cinema.
Yeah.
And then you backed up 2 months.
Yes.
And so how did you write? One, how did you decide to write the novel in this manner? Okay. And how did you decide to do the alternating voices?
Okay. Oh, great question. Thank you. Thank you, whoever asked that question. So I started off with actually chapter 1 and chapter 2. And then my third chapter, which was from Malik's point of view in Jaipur, was going to be, the collapse, or the collapse was actually going to come chronologically in the book. But when I was done with the first draft, I thought, I think it's better if I start with the collapse so people understand what we are working towards. And then let's see where the women are up in Shimla, because we've got 2 different places that we are talking about at this point. We are in Jaipur sometimes, and we are in Shimla sometimes. And I wanted to be clear on what's happening in both those places, because there are dramatic things happening in both those places that are going to come to a head at some point in the book. So what's happening in The Secret Keeper of Jaipur is that Malik, because she does not want him to be involved with anyone, and she does not want him to be married until he, acquire a family until he has something under his belt, something he can do for the rest of his life. And I think that kind of comes from my parents, really, where, like, my mother would always say, learn how to fend for yourself and be financially self-sufficient before you get married, because then you will know what you can do or what you can fall back on if something doesn't work out. And I think that is what I've really imbued both Lakshmi with, and she has then imbued Radha and Malik with that, sort of way of life. Make sure that you have something really important that you can do, that you can learn as we go on in life, before you get a family. So she sends Malik down to Jaipur. She knows all of the Maharanis. She knows Malik and Manu and Kantha. Manu is the director of palace facilities at the palace, at the Maharani's behest. And because the Maharaja has now died by the time we get to Secret Keeper of Jaipur, the year is 1969, the Maharanis are running the show. They have complete control over the purse, over the buildings that they are investing in, over any kind of infrastructure that they're investing in. So Malik is down there learning the craft of construction and learning what these ladies are doing. Well, the latest project that they've been involved in, and which the Singh Sharma Construction Company has constructed for them, is a jewel of a cinema. It is a state-of-the-art cinema, and it is modeled after a real cinema in Jaipur called Rajminder. And Rajminder was, it seated something like, I don't know, 1,500, 2,000 people. And people would come from miles around, from villages, from towns, miles around, because there was no more glamorous theater to go to at the time that it was built. So that is what Malik begins work on almost at the completion. And he attends the opening ceremony, which is what the prologue is all about. And one of the balconies collapses and people are hurt. And now Malik knows from the time, the 2 months that he has been involved in palace activities, he knows enough about engineering at this point and construction that it should not have happened. If things had been built properly, that balcony should never have collapsed. He wants to find out what the truth of the matter is. He wants to protect Manu and Manu's job, because Manu's job is threatened. But how is he going to do that without Lakshmi's help? He needs Lakshmi's help to get all of that going. So I needed to show what's happening in Malik's world through his eyes. I needed to show what's happening in Shimla through Lakshmi's eyes. And then I also needed to show what's happening in Shimla through Nimmi's eyes. And yes, she and Malik had become involved, and he is very devoted to her children. And she's very upset with Lakshmi for having sent Malik away and for still feeling as if she's in charge of him. So I needed those three voices. They're very strong voices, each of them. And I couldn't just tell the story from one point of view because we are in two different places.
Wow. Both the Henna's artists and the Secret Keeper of Jaipur are classified as historical fiction. The Secret Keeper of Jaipur is high on intrigue and emotion. Mystery fans actually would probably enjoy this a lot. What was different about writing this book?
I was writing it primarily because Malik was talking to me, and also because I had so many readers, thousands of readers, tell me how much they loved Malik and they wanted to know his backstory. They wanted to know his future story, what was going to happen to Malik. They just fell in love with him. And so, I dedicated The Secret Keeper of Jaipur both to my husband, who's the first one who got me started writing fiction, and to all those readers who fell in love with Malik, because I also love Malik. I wanted to know what was happening with him. So I think that, what's happening here is that we are learning everything from Malik's point of view, which was more of a masculine point of view. And, we see him struggling with some issues that I think young men struggle with. And we see him struggling with this idea of moral compass. Who has a moral compass? How do we earn a moral compass? Or do we develop it over time? Or are we just born with it? He is dealing with a lot of those kinds of things that I think young men in their first job have to deal with. And then I think that, the kind of intrigue that he's involved with is more something that I always wanted to tackle. Like, I love mysteries. I love murder mysteries. I love Agatha Christie's. I love the Sue Grafton books. I just love all of those kind of mysteries. And I think I've always wanted to write a mystery of my own. So in The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, I not only wrote a narrative, which gets you deeper into the mind of Lakshmi and Nimmi and Malik, but also gives you a mystery to boot. It just kind of develops so naturally. I don't even think about it.
Wow. One of the things that I enjoyed reading about, and this is going to be related to a question that's asked in the chat, the historical and cultural elements of this book were so wonderfully detailed and very, very interesting. Everything from decor to fashion to the architecture to the botanicals. So how much research did you have to do in order to get all the customs correct? And as a follow-up to that, if you ever got it wrong, does anybody call you out on it?
I had one anachronism in the henna artist that people did call me on, but in the Secret Keeper of Jaipur, nobody has called me on anything yet. I'm sure there's probably one or two things I must have gotten wrong, but sometimes I take liberties. Like, for example, if I mention a movie or a song that was playing at that time and everybody around the world would recognize it because it might be an Elvis Presley song, or it might be a Beatles song or something like that. I sometimes will fudge the timeline of when it was introduced because it serves my story better to have it introduced 2 years earlier, a year later, whatever. That's about the only thing that I deliberately fudge. Otherwise, I really try to stay very accurate to historical happenings of the time. Because I grew up in India, till the age of 9. And because I grew up in a South Asian family, so many of the things that I include about architecture, about the way people dress, about the way people eat, and the traditions of India are just known to me because I grew up in a family like that, where we celebrated Diwali. My mother loved to put out all of those little candles with, this oil wick candles everywhere for Diwali. She loved celebrating festivals. She just loved all of that kind of stuff. And then, of course, the henna on women's hands, that is something that I grew up seeing on mom's hands, on neighbors' hands, on my aunt's hands. Everybody always decorated for a festival or a wedding. And then, there's just so much about the food that is part of my DNA. Also, I cook Indian food and I love, it's still my favorite food. It's still my favorite. I cannot get away from Indian food. Like whenever my husband says, okay, what do you feel like eating tonight? My first choice is always Indian, but sometimes I think, well, maybe he's getting tired of Indian food, because he's a boy from Texas. He's not Indian at all. And so, but then, I'll mention, oh, let's go Japanese or Thai or whatever. But I notice that every time I say Indian, he'll go, oh, okay, great. Yeah. Because he loves it too.
This is another question from the chat. Hakeem and Mr. Reddy are characters whom we see for a very short time, and yet you have made them relatable and in a very caring relationship. How are same-sex relationships viewed in India?
Not well. There is a hard road for LGBTQ folks to climb, but things have gotten much more aware. These kinds of relationships are being promoted a lot more in the sense that the groups have gained some political power. And for example, there are some transgender people in the government. There are, lots of people who are in media who are LGBTQ now in India. And I think even though nobody really wants to talk about it openly, once you see people like that on national media, I think everybody can get used to it. I would like to promote a world in which everybody's okay with everybody else's sexuality or, however they want to be. Because in the end, we're just all human. We just all want to be loved. We want to love. We want, to raise good people. We want to make an impact in this world that's positive. Everybody wants that, regardless of, how we lean one way or the other in our sexual orientation. So I wanted to develop that relationship at the suggestion of my father. My father is always the justice guy. Like, he is always fighting for justice. If he sees an injustice happen just in his daily life, like if he sees somebody being treated badly, he will call those people on it, and he will write letters, and he will, make a statement and all of that. And so when he read the first draft of the henna artist, he said, now, honey, this is good, but you have left out LGBTQ people. And this is not right, because they are part of our people also. And so I thought, oh my God, he's absolutely right. Here's my dad, 89 years old, fighting for justice and totally calling me on it. So yeah, so I had to put in a relationship, and that one just came to me so naturally, because it was a perfect way to say that these two men have to be quiet about their relationship, and their lives are actually influenced by having to keep this secret. And sometimes the decisions they make are very much impacted by the secrets that they have to keep. And that's a shame. Because it compromises them in the end. Yeah.
Now, The Henna Artist was a novel about the empowerment of women within the Indian caste system. The Secret Keeper of Jaipur focuses on the corruption of money and power in a society designed to maintain a hierarchical order. Was it difficult to write from the different points of view from people living in the various levels of society?
No, not at all. I think that one of the things that I have always done in my life is observe people. And that comes from the fact that I'm an introvert. I know it probably doesn't look like it, but I am an introvert. And I have spent most of my life just watching people. I'm observing all the time, how two people interact with one another, who is the more powerful, who is the wealthier of the two, what kind of position do they have in class. And so I'm always sort of observing and noting things that are not said between people. Sometimes people are talking about one thing, and as I'm listening, I realize, no, you know what, they're really talking about something else. So I love all of these spaces in between. I love all of these contradictions that people have in their speeches and in their actions toward one another. I can say, I hate you, but I'm smiling. And so, what message am I actually sending out? Right. Yeah. So, I love those kind of contradictions, and I try to imbue my characters with those kind of contradictions as well. So I'm pretty used to sort of ferreting out what a wealthier, a higher class person, how they interact and how the domestic help interacts. And I think one of the things that really helps me is that I'm a combination of East and West. If I were just living in India all of this time, all of my life, I would not have the perspective on how all of these classes are interacting with each other. Because I think a lot of people who actually live in a culture, just like how we live here in the American culture, we don't understand that we also have a caste system here. Until Isabel Wilkerson wrote her book, Caste, I don't think anybody was seriously thinking, oh gosh, we have a caste system right here. And here we're always looking to India about their caste system. So I think that once you leave what you know and you go into another culture, you can observe your culture, your birth culture from afar, and see many more of the contradictions and inconsistencies in it than you can in your own in the culture you're living in currently. Uh-oh, have I frozen?
I think that's fascinating. I'm actually reading Kathy. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you and I can see you, and you're moving again.
Okay. Oh, good. But I was just going to text Barbara real fast. I'm frozen. Oh my God. At the end of the book, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. At the end of the book, you offer 3 gifts: a long glossary of translated words used in the book, information about the importance of gold to India women, and one of your mother's recipes. Would you tell us about the importance of gold and how you chose this particular recipe?
Great question. And thank you, Denise. Hi, Denise. Thanks for asking that question. Now, I think that you all know by now, if you've read The Henna Artist, that I am a feminist. I really believe in every woman's right to make decisions that are going to determine her destiny. One of the things that in India kind of hampers women in this way is this whole idea of giving gold dowries to women who are getting married. And what happens is that when you have a daughter, when you give birth to a daughter, you probably start from her birth collecting and saving for her eventual dowry that you're going to have to give to the other family. If you have a boy, you are lucky in that, you know, you're thinking, wow, this is an asset. A daughter would have been a liability because we would have had to give money out. But with a son, we are going to actually get money in our family when he gets married. So in India, there's a real, I think, automatic unfairness between boys and girls. Boys are assets, girls are liabilities. And this whole idea of dowries, I think we would be so much better off if we didn't have dowries, because those are what keep women locked into a certain position within a family. And so I wanted to tackle this, like, what is it about gold? What is it about these gold dowries that is so that Indian people go so crazy over? So what I found out, and this was so surprising to me, is that even though Indians have this insatiable hunger for gold, and not just Indians, Bangladeshis, Pakistanis, Sri Lankans, all these South Asians have this penchant for gold. Very little of the gold is actually mined in India. It is brought in from the outside. And when it's brought in from the outside, export duties have to be paid on it. Well, nobody wants to pay all the heavy export duties that are going to be leveled on gold. So half of it is brought in legally and half of it is brought in illegally. And as I was researching the nomadic tribes that Nimi belongs to, I was really curious about them, and they were just a fascinating society to research. But as I was researching them, I saw this one line that said, sometimes they are conscripted into the smuggling that goes on along the Himalayas, because the Himalayas are up on the northern border. So things can be coming in through China, through Nepal, and through Pakistan. And as they are coming in, they are being smuggled along these mountain routes where police are not going to be. And as they're smuggled in, some of the shepherds, some of these nomadic shepherds are conscripted into that business, whether they want to be or not. And so I thought, oh, well, that's interesting. So then, I just started looking at all of this stuff and realized that India had to actually put in a gold control act, a control act around gold, and say, listen, if you're going to bring in all of this gold, you're going to have to pay all of this duty on it. And then every jeweler is going to be limited to a certain amount of gold, because we can't have all of this, stuff pouring into the country. And and so, of course, there's just so much black market gold that is being, sold and made into jewelry and so on and so forth. And so I just thought, okay, well, let me see if I can do something with this and the nomadic tribes. So that's kind of how all of that gold obsession came around. The food that's mentioned in the back, my brother is also one of the audience members today, and he knows that in our family, we love this one curried vegetable. It's called aloo gobi, which is cauliflower and potato. And we love it. We love the way my mother made it. We always want to have aloo gobi sabji. So that's why I put that recipe in the back of The Secret Keeper. And then, of course, the brother who is on our Ferguson audience today is my brother Madhub, who actually developed the recipe for the Maharani cocktail that is in the back of The Secret Keeper. And, I asked him to make this cocktail because he was our family mixologist. And because I've got the older Maharani in here who is always watering her orchids with her gin and tonic and whatever else she's making. So I asked my brother Madhub, I said, would you please make some like a gin and tonic drink just for the Maharani? And he did.
Oh, wow. One of the questions is, I am so surprised to hear about nomadic tribes in India. Do they still live a nomadic way of life today? Yes.
Yes, yes. And one of the things I hope to achieve by putting this trilogy together, the Jaipur trilogy, is I want people to know about all the many different societies in India, the many different ways that people live in India. You know, these nomadic tribes, they don't have a caste. They don't have, a particular religion that they follow. There's many different nomadic tribes all throughout the Himalayas. So I think it's important for people to know that this society still exists. Many of them are illiterate because they don't have a school that they can stay in all year round because they're traveling with their families north and south all the time. And these treks they make are long and treacherous throughout the mountains. And, some people die, sheep and goats and water buffalo, sometimes they get sick. And these guys have all kinds of great herbal recipes to cure their own issues as well as their livestock issues. And so I found all of that fascinating. And I thought, well, Nimmi can tell us all about that. And so I put all of that in The Secret Keeper. And now Lakshmi is learning from Nimmi about all of this stuff that she knows about the nomadic tribes that Lakshmi was not privy to earlier.
We have a couple of questions about writing again, but before I ask those, there's one that says, the Singh's Samar, father of Ravi, is seen much less in this novel, as Ravi, son of Samar, is the father of Nikki. Will we see more of these characters in the future, or is this the last we'll be seeing the Singh family?
Oh no, we are going to always see the Singh family because they, ever since, I don't know if I can give a spoiler, but ever since the baby Nikki was born to Radha and Ravi, they have become always a force within the circle of Lakshmi, Malik, and Radha. So they're always going to be there. They're connected by blood now to these two forces. So yes, they are going to come back in book number 3, and I do believe that they are going to want that baby back. So that is all going to be part of book number 3.
Oh my gosh. Oh. How did you find your mentor when you decided to start to write, and how important was having a mentor to your process?
I think having a mentor is super, super important. When I first entered the program, I had looked at the syllabus and found out who the professors were who were going to be teaching. Now, this is super important. If you're going to take a workshop, a writing workshop, or if you're going to enter a program like this, you want to see who the instructors are. Have you read any of their books? Have you enjoyed reading any of their books? Do you think you could learn from them? Do you think you write similar to them? So I knew that when I entered this program, there was this one, instructor, Anita, and I just thought, I love her books. I want to write like her. That is the kind of stories that really appealed to me. Her book was about 17th century Iran and a young female rug weaver. And I thought, that's the kind of story I want to write. I love Khaled Hosseini's books for that same reason. He is teaching us something about Afghanistan. We're learning about a different culture. We're learning about a lot of women in this culture. And I think that finally, the time has come for us to understand that women lived in all of these cultures too. It wasn't just men, and that, women have a place in history. And that's, I think, something that I love to talk about. So when I entered the MFA program, I had a chance to have a mentor per semester. And that was somebody I would work one-on-one with, not every week, but 4 times during the semester. And I asked Anita if she would be my mentor, and she said, yeah, sure. So that's how I ended up with my mentor. And boy, did I select the right person for me, because her sensibility is very similar to my sensibility, the way we write and the way we want to immerse the reader in the environment that we are creating. I want my readers to feel like they are walking the streets of Jaipur, walking the pedestrian mall in Shimla. I want them to feel the heat and the cold. I want them to smell the spices. I want them to, smell the incense that is wafting throughout the jewelry store in Jaipur. I want them to be in these environments. So, and I think that's why Anita was such a good mentor for me also.
think you started to answer a couple of the other questions of do you get inspired by other writers? And I think the answer is probably yes, but are there other writers that inspire you? And who do you like to read? Who are your favorite writers?
Well, I have a lot of favorite writers. And of course, in the back of my books, under the acknowledgement sections, I always mention the ones that might have helped me, inform me about the background of some of the things that I'm writing about. You know, I have so many favorites, and I would be remiss if I did not mention my husband's writing, because it's so elegant, and it's the thing that I think attracted me first to him. Before I even knew him, I just really loved his writing. And so yeah, he went through the Stanford, you know, creative writing, the Masters of Fine Arts, you know, in writing program at Stanford. And let's see, so his book is called How I Met You. It's a series of short stories, and there is a story in there called Circle of Stones, which I just hold so dear to my heart. It's just really a wonderful story, and very poignant coming of age. Last year I read All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr, that I just adored. I read Pachinko by Min Jin Lee, that I thought was really phenomenal, right? This year I read The Last Exiles by, oh gosh, I'm going to forget the name, but it was also about North Korea, but in modern day, and people who desert North Korea. How do they do it? How do they go through China? What's the route? And, you know, I found that really fascinating after writing The Secret Keeper of Jaipur and the mountain ranges and things like that. And then let's see, another book that I read was The Far Field by Madhuri Vijay, which I found really interesting because it informed me about all of what's happening up in Kashmir, present day. You know, what is the fighting all about? How are the locals taking it versus the army that comes in to fight, and versus the mercenaries? You know, how is all of that happening? So that was kind of interesting. So I like to read, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie is one of my favorite writers, and she's Nigerian, and Purple Hibiscus, Half of a Yellow Sun, Americana. She is an amazing writer. She writes what you would think is kind of simplistic, but even simple writing is very elegant. You know, it feels, it may come across as simple, but it's actually complicated to write that simply. So yeah, I love reading about other cultures, and I'm waiting for Khaled Hosseini's next book, because I think I've read everything now.
Going back to your work, how do you cultivate a conversation with your characters? And what advice do you have for new storytellers?
Okay. One of the best things you can do as a new storyteller is to ask the kinds of things to your characters that you might ask if they were at a party and you just met them. And so if you just met them, you might ask them, you know, where did you go to school? Or who are your friends? So who do you hang out with? What's your favorite music? What do you like to eat? You know, these are probably things you might find, you know, in casual conversation, not that directly, but, you know, you'll probably find all these kinds of things. You know, what are your favorite TV shows? If you're talking to a modern day kind of person, if it's an older person, then you might say, what is the music of your time period that you really listen to? So talk to them as if they were a real person, and write it all down. And that becomes your backstory for that character. And I swear to you, if you really listen to your characters, if you really develop them in your mind, then you will end up with somebody who feels three-dimensional. You will end up with somebody who is going to be phenomenal on the page once you get them into the book. I think that one of the best things to do as a storyteller is to kind of keep your story to yourself for a while, not because I think somebody's going to steal it. Only you can write the story you're going to write. Nobody else can steal your story. Okay. So don't worry about that. But I think keep the story to yourself, because it's going to keep changing. It's going to keep growing. And it's better to work out some of the initial kinks yourself before you share it with the world. So that would be really marvelous if you could do that. And another thing as a storyteller is, you guys, you have to revise. You have to revise and revise and revise, because writing is about rewriting. That is what it's all about. A lot of people tell me, you know, I've gone through 2 revisions and I'm ready to go to a publisher. And I'm like, you're not ready. You're not ready. Believe me, you're not ready to go to a publisher just yet. You know, unless you've been writing since you were 3 years old and keeping a diary all these years, and you really, you know that you know how to write. Most people, when they start, there's going to be the obvious mistakes that they make, that it just takes a while to work those obvious mistakes out. And then you can get to the next level of writing, which is a lot smoother and more fun to write and read.
You know, Lakshmi is an expert on natural healing, her sachets, her treatments, her cures. Did someone in your family have a role like that? And where? No. And where did you learn that much about that type of medicine?
Well, I think growing up in a South Asian household, you actually do know a lot about recipes. You know a lot about spices that are used. If you have indigestion, people will tell you to eat some fennel seeds, chew some fennel seeds, and it will go away, whatever it is, that acid that's coming up. If you have a cut or a scrape, you know, your mom will put some turmeric on it, and she might even combine the turmeric with some coconut oil to make a nice little paste and put it right there on the hurt, and it will heal itself. You don't have to put some smelly ointment on it. And then I remember my mom used to put coconut oil in her hair and on mine at least once a week when we were going up there, so that our hair would be nice and soft and conditioned and shiny and all of that for the rest of the week. So there's just so much that I just know from having lived in India till I was 9. And also it's just a part of my DNA growing up in a South Asian household. And, you know, keep in mind, my mother did not start speaking in English all the time until she was probably 40, 45, something like that. So I was, you know, she was constantly speaking in Hindi to us. So a lot of that language comes through to me. The only things that I actually have to research are things like, for Nimmi, I didn't know about all of the flora that grow up along the mountains. And so in my research with the nomadic tribes, that's where I found out what they use for heartburn, what they use for a cut, what they use for like a broken bone or something like that. So that was really fascinating to learn the different kinds of ways that nomadic tribes deal with the remedies they need. So yeah, for the Secret Keeper, I had to do a lot of research on what Nimmi knows about these healings that she needs.
Wow. You know, you mentioned that you're a feminist. How did your upbringing in India and America help or hinder becoming a feminist?
Well, you know, it's interesting. One of my book clubs, and I have done 450 book clubs now, everybody, in the last year. But in one of my book clubs, I had somebody ask me, you know, we see a grown-up Sheila Sharma. Now she's Sheila Singh, and she's married to Ravi in The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, because 12 years have passed since the henna artist. And so somebody asked me, what would your life have been like Sheila's if you had stayed in India? And I had to really think about that for a second. And I thought, oh my gosh, yes, I think that's what my life would have been like. I'm not sure that I would have been allowed to be a feminist. I think that my husband would have been chosen for me by my family and their family. I think that I would have had probably an education, a bachelor's, because my father is very big on education, and I think he would have sent me to college. But then I think I would never have used that degree for anything. I think I would have had several children. And I think, you know, I would have just been a society wife like Sheila, like Parvati, her mother-in-law is. So I don't think I would have been very much of a feminist in the Secret Keeper of Jaipur kind of lifestyle. But I think that growing up in America, was very helpful to me in my development as an independent person. And everybody around the world knows that if you become an American, you are much more free thinking. People let you be who you are and let you think about things the way that you think about them, and they encourage you to think differently, right? So we are a very individual-based society here, whereas in India, it's a very much of a family and groupthink society. So it matters so much what your parents want you to do, what your family wants you to do. If you defy them, then that is considered really an awful thing, and you will feel guilt and shame for the rest of your life when you defy them. Here in America, not so much. Your parents leave you alone after a while. They go, okay, you know what? I trust you. I think you're going to grow up to be just a fine person. You go and do you. And I think in The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, I'm also trying to show that Lakshmi, now that she has grown into this parent figure for Malik all of these years, she's having a hard time letting go of him. She's having a hard time saying, Malik, I trust you to do the right thing. So I need to separate you from this woman that you have become involved with in order for you to have a better life. And, she has to go through her own journey to release herself from that obligation as a parent. So I think, even here, even in this society today, I think parents constantly struggle with that issue of, can I let go? Is it okay for me to let go? Do I want to let go? I don't trust my child still, at 18 to do all the things that I think, they should be doing. So, the answer is I would not have been the feminist that I am today had we still been living in India.
Wow. I only have time for one more question, but I think what I'm going to say before I say this question, The Secret Keeper of Jaipur is available, as well as The Henna Artist, if you haven't read it yet, through the Ferguson Library, but also through our bookseller, Elm Street Books in New Canaan, an independent bookstore. So please, you're going to enjoy it. I know I couldn't sleep at all until I finished it. But I want to ask you, give us a sneak preview of the third book of the trilogy, because that's going to focus on Radha, who's been living in Paris.
Yes.
You probably you tell us a little bit about the story, about the research.
Yes. So, my husband and I lived in Paris for a while, and I love Paris. And of course, around the corner from us was a perfumery where there was a nose, right? The master perfumer who worked there. And I've always been fascinated by that whole concept of this fragrance industry having these master perfumers who actually design the fragrances, develop all of the recipes basically for the fragrance. And then there's other people who manufacture it and put it all together. So the year is 1973 in book number 3. And Radha is now a lab assistant in a fragrance house to a master perfumer, who is, of course, a woman, because I have to have women in fantastic roles always. And so, and by the way, it's totally realistic. There were a couple of master perfumers who were women in France at that time. So I'm very happy about that. So she's working for this master perfumer. She's on the cusp of helping design a fragrance for this master perfumer, but she has to drop down to Jaipur, and she meets up with Lakshmi there because, as it turns out in my research, I find that much of the base notes of a fragrance is manufactured in India. So sandalwood oil, tuberose oil, a lot of the heavier rose oils, those are manufactured in India, and they go into a lot of these perfumes. So she's going to drop down, and the two of them are going to go off and find some of these base notes, because Radha wants something really interesting and original for this signature scent. Now, at the same time, she has left her family back in Paris. She is married to a Frenchman, which is why she lives in Paris. She has 2 little girls, the family she's always wanted, and there's a knock at the door. And on the other side of that door is somebody that she has not seen since he was 18 and a baby. And he is going to say, I have recently found out that Radha might be my mother. So how is that going to happen? How is all of that going to play out? And then, of course, the Sings are going to be involved in all of this. So I am having so much fun doing book number 3 also. And I can't wait to finish it and to have it in all of your hands.
And I can't wait to read it. I want to thank you so much. This has been such a treat for me, for the people who are in the audience. Just another wonderful night. Hopefully you'll come back for book 3 because it's just been wonderful. I also want to thank the Friends of the Ferguson Library for all their help in putting this program together, and just thank you so much.
Hey, thank you. Thanks everybody for listening. Bye, Alice.
Bye. Have a great night.
Bye, Denise. Bye, Mother.